NCLA meeting order. And Christine is using government one. Maybe not every week, sorry.
No, he's at the IGMA.
He can still have COVID though.
Well, he.
We don't listen.
Roll call, President Schmidt. Here. Vice President Meadows.
Here.
Secretary Hill.
Yes.
Member Daly.
Here.
And Member Doherty is joining remotely. She has satisfied the conditions of 82449.
Okay, shall we start with the pledge of allegiance? Somebody could have flag. Oh, thank you. Good. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty. Okay. I'm just gonna open it up for public comments. As you know, you're unable to discuss or take action on any issue, but we welcome them, so. Nobody writing comments, okay, we'll move on to the next item. Informational items, financial update,
And so in your packet, you have the current statements from the county controller's office. And there is one update to the budget that was approved at the last meeting. And that is simply that we have the actual tax revenue figures from NDS. So it's in the order of $200 increase from what was projected.
those are the highlighted in yellow.
Yes, well,
Changes. So Suzanne brought up a couple of other things that she thought should be changes, which we're looking at.
Did you, I'm sorry, the packet is big and the figures are not scrolling fast enough. Could you refer us to the English?
Oh.
To make it easier for me to
Yes.
follow along.
this is item B1 in your packet,
And the page is,
page 6.
page 6. Okay. I'm sorry.
I don't think we may have that again. So Suzanne offered some minor updates to this document, and I don't know how they. I'm not sure how they played into what we did last time. I know we marked things up last time too. What is one of these?
The direction we gave was to incorporate a few changes in some of the past budgets, but I can't tell. I
Yeah,
don't remember the numbers.
They have been added.
They have been.
In the fiscal year 2021, we didn't have specifics for the administrative costs, and those have been added. They're not different from the budget that was presented and approved in their previous fiscal year. That's why they're not.
Yes, highlighted things where there was $1 off, and then the 18-19, there were some differences. Revenue, there were some minor differences.
Well, frankly, part of the problem is we shouldn't be showing as many past years, so.
Let's just forget them. Let's just go from 2020 to.
It looks like,
2024.
I was gonna say, we're recording on the surface here, so when you're speaking, if you could try and speak up to make sure that people
Maybe
can.
not into my keyboard.
Sorry.
So what would be a reasonable past years to show? What would be normal and people who understand this stuff? Would 3 years be soon?
Well, the reason I believe we were reaching back to 2018, 2019 is that it's the last normal pre-COVID year.
Oh, I-
Because you had
For
anomalous
reference.
years in 1920, 2021, 2022.
Yeah, because there was so much lost and we've been doing these budgets for quite a while. I mean,
And I'm happy to cut off whatever, but I think that was.
No, I don't wanna cut it off now that you've done it, but maybe for future
Mhm.
budgets.
Yeah.
I'm fine with it, that's.
I'm fine with it as listed. Entertaining motion. There's minor changes.
There's no, this is informational.
Oh,
so
okay.
There's no need to.
Okay, so we could update it slightly if we want to, other numbers for the next time we adopt the budget.
You want to go to public comment?
Yeah, I will open it up to public comments.
And I see we're talking about the budget.
We're talking about the informational budget.
Right, and, the numbers that I have on there are from the audit. I have the audits here. It seems like if you're going to have previous years, or you have to show previous years, is to be able to compare how your new budget is to what previous years were. And so if it's
What-
not accurate, why would you do it?
My suggestion is, let's incorporate those into next year's budget when we approve it. And going forward, we can check those numbers and make sure, so when we show past years, the current year looks like what we want it to be. I just hate keep bringing this budget back again and again.
And I thought Christie just told us that she did take, because we gave direction, you gave her your notations,
And she didn't incorporate them,
and she did not incorporate.
right? She picked up some,
I'm with your proposal.
Okay, so let's incorporate them into next year. Transfer those to Christie, and because we'll be doing the next budget with them.
can I suggest you just say this then for next year so we have separate numbers?
I have your notes. I have these, is it what you're referring to?
Right, and I can, yeah, I would fit you in ones that just reflect them, your budget percentage.
Yeah, the total we have is the same, and I think that's the big one we need to look at. Fund balance, and the current year is correct. Except.
Well, she doesn't.
Oh, it's just monuments, okay. Let's move on. I think this is the meat of the matter tonight, and I hope we can get to, I don't know if you wanna share information about the council, if we get in this discussion, if that would be useful. And then I can add, my goal would be able to get this into a form that we can agree that we move on to the next step. Working in the city as reviewed by the council, or suggested by the council to show that we support as the MCLA, the next step of moving forward on RFP. But that's just my goal.
We can get that update, I wrote down this part, if you want to, you probably can't read.
I can read it.
Go right ahead.
So at the last council meeting, and for Los Altos on Tuesday, a week ago tomorrow, council requested that the library commission discuss possible improvements to the library, and we directed staff to return to the council at a future study session to discuss the library commission's recommendations on the subject. And I think also that I know that I am at least interested in understanding the ramifications of potentially returning partial tax funds, not that I have any desire to do that, mind you, but I think that it would behoove us to at least understand that as part of our obligation to the taxpayers.
Well, and I think we agreed to do that at the last meeting on the next agenda, so we will,
Yes.
so we will make sure, I mean, I
Yeah, the only
definitely
reason
support that.
The only reason I mention it is that juxtaposed to whatever we go
Yeah.
back to the library commission, we would like to also have commentary from either the two meetings, whomever. That's the one, if we are unable to find a suitable way to invest.
Well, and also another alternative was to use the leftover money to extend, so we wouldn't have to go out for a person.
So those are things that we would hear in
So we would
conjunction with.
extend into the previous year.
And then Chuck,
Maybe I'm getting off topic. I mean,
Yeah,
the
that's-
primary thing is right now is the RFP. But the Los Altos Council asked. To back to the council with recommendations.
and my opinion or first feeling is that if we at the NCLA say, yeah, we plus this document and this way forward, that gives the library commission the best way of moving forward and determining what's going on.
Yes, I think, I understand where you're coming from. I am concerned though that it's a Los Altos field, it's a huge Los Altos cities. That even the. I'm not sure that the library commission can. The NCLA can do it without. And in fact, when I look at the RFP, now we to the point where we're going through the RFP as well. So.
Can we pick up the city staff issue again, because I think we discussed.
I think it's broader than that.
I think we discussed last time that the NCLA can't run this RFP, the NCLA, I mean, we build or participate in TAC, we determine what the money is being used for, and then we're supporting the town being able to go out and run this. Or manage the contract with the support of certain members of the NCLA community, and my feeling is, or what I'd like to see is that if we say this is something we can do in support of the library commission moving forward, that gives them the most information and knowledge to move forward with the rest of the town and the other groups involved in this and the community can speak to it. But I hope that the NCLA can set them up to say, okay, now go off and start moving on this. We support this work going forward. And it's going to be an interplay. They're going to have to come back and say to us, well, this thing won't work or this thing does work. But to give the library commission the most authorization we can so they can start discussing this minutes and that they know the NCLA will back.
And also, I'd like to know what role the Hills play in this, because obviously their taxes are going into this fund too. So how do we keep them, they may not be a decision maker, but they might have influence.
They have representation on the library commission.
Right,
And we could have them on the TAC or to,
right.
but thank you. Being a Hills resident, I appreciate your concern. Yeah, I think we can manage that, but I appreciate it.
Mr. Ernest,
I was just gonna offer from the city staff perspective that at the last city council meeting, by providing that direction, library commission will be discussing the possible improvements that were given by city council on Thursday at their meeting. So once they do that, then they could come back to city council with the study session, and that could inform the city council about what to do, regardless of the RFP itself.
Yeah.
So the library commission could go do the work, come back to city council, and then that could be the opening for city council to say what they would like to do as far as the potential improvements, because I think city council directed all possible improvements, and it'll be a discussion on Thursday, how broad do you go and what's the direction moving forward.
So the study session is on Thursday or the council?
No, the library commission is Thursday. No, so, and I want to give a little context, because you seem to have an assumption that the city council has bought into this, but other than the two of us, I don't think the city council is in the know. They have no idea there's a draft RFP that's gonna pay for someone to go all the way through site concept design alternatives. And the city council may not want all those options to be explored. So that's why I think having the library commission come say, here's what we've developed, NCLA can fund this proposal. But if city council says, we don't wanna do this, or we wanna do, or we only wanna consider option 1, we don't wanna consider 2 through 5. I'm making this up, there are not options 2 through 5, but, so I think we're having the tendency to have the cart several miles in advance of the horse, and it's just, we gotta bring council along, and so the study session can give some ability to hash it out, and then, potentially that would be direction enough to bring forward, the RFP. But this is done in isolation of the city council that will make determinations about the building, so.
Council would have to approve the RFP.
Oh, and I agree with that, and I understand it has to go through other entities. My hope is that the NCLA could say, we're behind this, so that that won't be a question for the council and other groups. They say, okay, the NCLA's agreed, this is something we want to pursue, so that, shuts down one question. The NCLA is on board with doing that, and that was my hope. So maybe it's not the whole RFP, though it's actual work. It is just that we have this money, we're willing to pursue the RFP, and we as an NCLA back that. So when the library commission does their study session, they can stand up and say, yes, the NCLA supports this, there's no doubt, and they voted on it.
So maybe we can discuss the RFP, because I have a question.
Okay.
The RFP, because we kind of had the context discussion, which we just were touching on, but let's dive into.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Mhm.
Other questions. So I didn't go through each and every page to identify questions, but I want to start with the very first of the proposals, tasks A through D. I think it would be potentially helpful that going up through tasks, well, I'm thinking there needs to be a point, whether it's after task B or it's after task C, where we do a check-in to say, are we still continuing? This is a very expensive study, I feel like, if we're building and site concept design alternatives, knowing architects and stuff, it's very costly. So as I said, I don't know whether it's after task B, where you confirm programming and space needs, and it could be, because if programming and space needs says we need that 40,000 square feet that everyone's been talking about, which means a major construction project, then that might be the end of the project. So, and I don't even know that we need to go to task C, because again, developing work plans and costs and project schedules is also a timely and costly thing. So my proposal is after task B, there needs to be a check-in, because it may be a no-go at that point. For assuming it comes back and one of the options is, oh yeah, all you can do that makes sense is bulldoze it and create, 2 stories building or something.
Should we characterize that as a phase 1 and phase 2? Like phase 2 is actually architectural plans, drawings, like.
Work plans,
Yeah.
cost and project schedule, that would be,
Right.
that would make
Phase 1
sense.
is,
Yeah,
do we go to phase 2?
at the end of it, yeah. So that would be my impression, because it wouldn't make sense to go all the way through if the option is likely to be a no-go and not, Then there was another, I didn't see it, but I might have missed it. I didn't actually see options described along the spectrum of what we talked about. I didn't see anything defined as keep the existing structure and tell us how close you can get and how realistic it is or it isn't. I just saw that this said bring, actually it said bring 2, and then in parentheses 3 options or something like that. Anyway, it didn't go anywhere to defining all the options. And again, if all the options are bulldoze and build a 2-story building, then that's not really helping us assess what our true options are. So, and the folks who worked on this can point me to it if I've missed it, because I may well have missed it, but it looked to me like the options were up to the consultant to develop, and I don't think that's necessarily what we want.
Under section 7 of the RFP, it does say, as a bullet point, that project description could be renovating within the building. So it's in there in that sense, but I think it might be actually happens in the other side. So,
Well, and could be to me isn't sufficient. I think we need a complete assessment that says, I mean, even if it says, no, you can't work within the building because of, the things we've heard in the past. But I don't want could be's, I want there to be a definitive assessment of an interior, existing footprint, revamp, so. But that's just me, and that depends on NCLA as a whole. So those are the two things that are kind of high level that I picked on, picked up on, and picked on, essentially. And then the TAP. Again, this puts, it seems to put NCLA in the lead, and we have this dichotomy where we're supposed to be, and so this is section 9 for COVID services. And again, at some point, we really need to think about, are we gonna stay focused on what we're supposed to be doing, collecting the taxes and then dispersing them versus leading task forces? We try to encourage the library commission to be the central point for this type of exercise. And so I would question the TAC, because it seems to be written up as though NCLA is the leader, so perhaps some discussion around that. Then I will yield to other people to have comments.
My preference would be to have the city staff be the lead agency interfacing with the vendor and handling the RFP. It's in their wheelhouse more so than it is in the wheelhouse of itself as a member of NCLA. Which doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a technical advisory committee, but it just shouldn't be an organ of NCLA. Staff has to identify, the right people. And then we may have an NCLA person on that committee. It's up back to the city.
I think that works well. I think NCLA should step away from the leadership position and become a funding agency rather than an enrichment group. And NCLA will have voice and vote.
Well, and the purse strings, which gives us
Right.
some.
Well, I think we're all in violent agreement on that, because we just don't have the bandwidth, the knowledge, or the.
And if we keep going back to our bylaws, we really are only supposed to have 2 meetings a year. So instead of monthly or even more frequently.
Yeah, I agree, my whole goal is to be able to kick it over to somebody who can pick it up and carry it with as much support as we can give as funding agency, so, and I agree with you, we need to look at what happened to give all the money back, because some minor challenges on that, usually have the answer, but, yeah. So, so I think we all agree that this has to be taken up by the city, and I don't know what that means, I guess that means the city council is gonna have to determine that that's what they want to spend the time on.
So that's why we decided to ask for a study session, then we can at least have a discussion and get a sense of the interest level, and then if it is the staff that's serving as the lead, then it becomes a trade-off in terms of priorities, so.
But that's the city council, I mean.
Right, exactly, but I mean, we have a lot of priorities, as you, I'm sure, so, but anyway, so that's, I think the library commission can take this up after today's meeting and then, decide how to present it to council, because they just don't know that this is, I mean, if you told anyone that there's an RFP, ready to go out, they would, any of the other 3, they would be shocked, so.
Well, I think that you can do the RFP as something's ready to go out, or the RFP is a great encapsulation of what our mission is. And so I think if you present it that way, it's a lot of work that's been done that, can move forward, and I don't think there's not just enough thing we could manage that and do that without the rest of the support of the city. Or that's always been my assumption. And I mean, with this RFP and all the thought that's gone in it, you don't have to start from zero. It's got a lot of stuff in here and recognizes past history and.
And it demonstrates that NCL has taken a deep, thorough look at
Yeah.
this and that we're ready to present and go to the next step if the city council does that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, again, I think I would attribute this to the library commission. They brought it
right,
for discussion and approval, but you guys did the work.
But we're gonna take that.
I wanted to share where it belongs. but, you know.
Yeah, no, I think, but that's one reason I would like to adopt this as much as possible. Maybe we need to put some changes in it, but I would like to adopt such a strong motion for the library commission to be able to go for this. And I don't know how we can put that, I mean, to show all the work that's gone in there, all the thought that's gone in there, so there's a starting point that we approve as the end. of it.
I think it's a good place to start the discussion,
Mhm.
though I would like this. The changes that we've discussed,
Okay,
potentially incorporated, or you can just leave it as a point of discussion and the convention can mention it, but.
no, I think the things you put in there, especially about how this refers to city staff and who manages the RFP, that's very important to include. Because otherwise people don't think MPOs can do it all, and I think it can be good.
I was just gonna say that I think, city staff and the library commissioners and presidents can take all the comment that we've been provided as well as the RFP and use that as part of the articles that we'll look at as the possible improvements that were given direction by city council. So this can be used as, a launch pad for the conversation.
and I would like to suggest that we start getting these drafts.
Yes.
Because this is probably the third draft I've read, and there's no date, so I don't know. Later on, I'm not gonna know which is the most recent draft. One of the reasons I wanna bring it up is that in section 4 in the needs assessment update, where it mentions the representatives, it does not mention the volunteers that we had that were not on any of those agencies. We had at least 6 members from the community who were not library connected at all. And they were selected very deliberately to provide that external, non-library perspective.
So, we want to open up the public comments? I remember that. Archie, do you have anything you would like to add or ask? Okay, oh, there you are, right over there, Archie, yes, thank you. Any other? Public comments?
Going along Cindy's vein, it also mentions that this was all done by Group 4. It was actually Group 4 did the needs assessment, and it was Strata who did the engineering, feasibility and cost estimate. I have a study, you don't have a copy. And Francis Alley. In 2019 and 2018, it went before both councils. That, the idea of actually either major remodel, redevelopment, or rebuild the brand new library, and it was approved by both councils to proceed, to NCLA to proceed with, the pursuit. So it's not that there wasn't ever before councils, just since COVID.
Well, yeah, it's like-
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago, what do you mean proceed? To build a new building?
Yeah, we had the task force, we were going out to a bond measure to get we needed $60 million, we're going to go out for bond.
So to proceed with the bond measure.
No,
No,
it
it
was the whole
was-
thing.
Yeah.
Bond measure is gonna be about 35 million, and we couldn't, we already achieved.
Well, that would be helpful to have that meeting information, because I've never heard that.
Yes.
So,
Anyway, so yeah, so it's councils were aware of this, but as it was 4 or 5 years ago. But, now that we've picked it up again, now would be the appropriate thing to go back to the council, submit them back on board and behind it. The, you know,
But this is not, we're not suggesting a bond measure.
No, we're not, because now we have money. Now it's not the
Well,
situation.
we don't have 60 million.
No, we're not building a new library.
Right.
We're proposing an expansion, remodel.
Julie, I would love to hear your comment.
So I think so from my perspective, the way that this first came to us, it was a request from NCLA with respect to how to look at potential expenditures of money, how those would fit within the lie legal opinion.
Mhm.
So it was clearly for the NCLA to hire somebody to say, yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry, we're looking at.
No, I'll say that. So it was about putting together or you had asked for an approach, so we gave an approach and it was to give it to you to decide if this was, if you could get information with regard to potential ways to spend the money that would be within the lie decision. And I think that decision lies squarely with the NCLA, right now with the county, or with the city, I'm sorry. Right, it's whether you can spend the money in a way that's consistent with your fiduciary duties, as outlined in that decision. So that's why we brought this was not a recommendation by the commission. It was simply a request for us to put together something, and so we gave it to you for that purpose. It was shared with the commission, in August, it was never voted upon, we didn't vote upon it, because again, we saw this as your decision. And so I'm just trying to think through logically, because now what it seems to me, and this is not bad, I'm just trying to get my head around it, is now what you wanna do is go to the city, and I understand, informing the city, having the city go through alternatives to see if there's anything that the city is willing to do. It would still have to come back to this board, I think, for you guys to decide whether you can agree to spend the money, or give the money, or whether it's within your fiduciary duty, how you wanna do it. So I guess whether you wanna do that now, or whether you wanna do that later, that to me is up to you, right?
Do which now or later?
Decide whether a proposal fits within your fiduciary duty to spend the money. Does that make sense?
And my reading when Claire was here is that this does fit within our fiduciary.
To spend this money, but.
Yeah.
But the idea was not just to spend this money on a feasibility study, but to see whether the alternatives that were proposed would fit within your fiduciary duty.
And my read on her, assessment is the things that you're proposing and what comes back in the feasibility study would fit in with that. I mean, she has to see
The outcome.
the outcome, but as it's outlined here, it looks like it can. meet
Well,
those
yeah, but
criteria.
it goes, I will say that it's not up to just one attorney to look at it. The city attorney, one point of bringing it to the city is the city attorney and city manager can look at this and get an understanding whether they are comfortable with that. And it's a little bit chicken and egg, because we do have to have the discussion that we keep referring to, that we'll put on the next agenda, about all the options that are different, because I tried to bring them up earlier and I was, nobody wanted to talk about them. But there are a lot of other options that we haven't talked about, right? There's a number of different options, create an endowment with this fund, or as you say, listen, I don't wanna get into it, we don't have the agenda item right now, but we've never had that discussion. So this is all around the option of what can we do with the library if we want to use that money, and if we're comfortable using that money. We each have a fiduciary responsibility, and I myself am not comfortable that we've done due diligence regardless of Claire's opinion, I tend to agree, but I don't think we've done due diligence to discuss, you know, to discuss the whole, consequence of spending that money, so.
And I would agree with that, because, you know, Suzanne and I first put together, options, and then Suzanne expanded upon it. And we've gone down path one, and there's at least four others that we need to also explore for our communities to understand why we might back one versus the other. So otherwise, I think we walk into a pit of morass when people bring up the other options and say, well, what about? We could say, here's our research, this is how we came to this decision, what other ideas do you have? So I don't think it would be, in this economic environment, I don't think it's a good way to go, to not explore all the options thoroughly.
I mean, and if we try to get another parcel tax in 2030, and nobody's happy with what we did with an excess in this one, well, just forget about it. You know, so.
And that might be the right answer.
Well, and I'm not presupposing the answer, but we have to do the due diligence, we have to look at all those alternatives. So, but the commission has developed, and the subcommittee or task force or whatever you three were, developed this around the option that we asked them to, which is exploring what we can do if we do use that money in that way. And so I think it still makes sense to move this forward, but meanwhile, the next time we have to explore those other options, because otherwise I also have misgivings.
I think there's another constraint here that we should air out. And that is on the part of the city. I'm not speaking for the city in this situation, but I am speaking as an informed member of the NCLA board, which is to say, I think it's unlikely the city of Los Altos would approve an expansion that changes. It's possible that tearing down the original addition and rebuilding it as a two-story addition in the exact same footprint would be acceptable, but other encroachments on either the orchard or any of the scarce land in the civic center campus is, in my opinion, likely to meet with almost insurmountable resistance.
That's why I think it's important that we ensure that the base case of exact footprint and building as is now, what is the feasibility or lack thereof, completely revamping it. I mean, thinking back to when Nolan Town was presenting to us in that room over there, they seemed to say they could do a whole renovation. I believe it like 1.8 million. But anyway, we could do both libraries for that, if that were to be true, but that's beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. So that's why I think it's very important to say, without doing anything to the structure of the building, exterior, what does that option look like? And if it's infeasible for X, Y, Z, that's fine, and you know, we're getting an answer maybe for the third, fourth time, but we can't start a project now without getting that answer.
So on page C2 and C3 of the RFP, I don't know which number that is in terms of PDF. You know, there are 11 items from the needs assessment, and I'm just looking through those items, and I think that the vast majority of them probably could be handled with an internal remodel. I mean, things like inadequate power out, sort of things like that are things that could be surely handled with an internal remodel. And I would also put it out there that we're not going to necessarily end up with a binary solution. Maybe the solution is that we spend $5 million on an internal remodel and that we still have X million left of the parcel tax that we then need to decide, okay, what's the disposition of those? So it's probably not long enough, I think.
Yeah, I guess my view is that I wanna give the library commission maximum operating room. So we set them up that they can do the most, and it's easier to pare back from there than it's gonna be, say, well, we want you to do this, but maybe somebody do this. I mean, you can always say, yes, we're gonna do less than you
I
provide.
don't want to put work into something that's not gonna, that we know ahead of time isn't a viable avenue.
I leave that up to them.
Yeah.
I don't wanna presuppose that they're gonna be the ones that are gonna be, as we said, we're not the lobbying group that says we wanna do this, we wanna do that. And we're the group that says, okay, we can support this,
Right.
here's the money, now you guys have to go lobby for it. But then that gives them the ability to shift within the parameters.
If I may speak, when we drafted this, Julie and I drafted this, it was with the intent that the work would be done within the shell. And that, we presuppose that the assessment would look at the possible and present that to the council and to the NCLA.
And that's the way I read it, actually, is that you don't, anyway, it could be separately interpreted, but that's how I read it.
And I would say if NCLA would like to give the most amount of flexibility, it would be great to encourage or support the scope of the RFP, or like moving forward, looking at the possible opportunities that exist for improvement, but not necessarily approving any specific document or language, because that would allow the library commission and the city council the most amount of flexibility to figure out the different options and then come back to NCLA at some point with those.
And that was my goal, what I hope we could do is give the library commission as much focus going forward, so, but if they're gonna have to do the hard work of figuring out what's gonna work with the city council and the town.
Well, I think, again, we're really all in agreement. I just didn't see that, that we necessarily were requiring a current footprint scenario, and that has to be in there. So I think for it to be practical, because otherwise then the direction is go back and.
I think it's in here, but it's somewhat buried.
It's not as clear.
Section 7:1.
Yeah, I maybe because we talked about it before, but my thing was, that was always relevant. So are there other? So we've given some guidance on how we want the RP to look. I don't think I have anything past what you guys are saying. I don't know if you have anything else. I do think how the TAC is formed is gonna be very important, but that's something we can have a conversation about. I think we all agree, everyone should participate in it, and then how we move forward. I think all of us want to move forward in the right way.
Can we ask the library commission if they think this RFP is sufficient for them to take up the council's request to review options and get back to us?
Yeah, we're just gonna.
To me, it seems to me like, yes, the RFP.
There's a lot of
meets
work
our-
that went into this,
Yes.
and as long as it's sort of couched as it's a starting point for the discussion, then, because you don't want to have to do too much. I want to make sure that my go, no go after tax A and B didn't get lost. I mean,
That I hear.
those are very important.
So as a commissioner, I think we have enough, and we have Anthony here who's going to be very helpful. We should remind the NCLA that on Thursday there will be changes to the commission. I will no longer be chair, we'll have another chair, we'll go down to 5. We will have a new member, so there's gonna be a lot of discussion. So, yeah, hopefully with Anthony's support, we can figure out.
Could I ask who the new member is? I just don't know. I don't think they're appointed.
Yes.
Michelle Morris is the new member.
Okay, thank you.
I no longer will be on
We'll miss you. Okay, so I don't know how we want to word this motion. I assume there's one more discussion.
I move that that NCLA refer this draft RFP to the library commission As a starting point for their,
And then we support the grant of it, the general intent of it, or
yeah, I suppose you could add a statement that says, and we, based on advice of council, we believe it's within the scope of our authority.
I'll second that.
okay, for Christie, did you get it? Artie, do you have any comments? I'm sorry, it's hard. You're okay, thank you, sorry. When you're not here.
All right, we have a motion and a second, all those in favor?
I'm confused as to what. I was with you until something got added at the end, so, what was added at the end, that we support the scope?
No,
this,
no,
or-
based on,
I mean-
based on the advice of council, we believe the options represented in the RFP.
I'm not prepared to support it with that in there, because we haven't had the discussion around the due diligence.
Right.
And so we're,
The attorney hasn't. looked at
and
it.
our city attorney hasn't looked at it, so I think that's, I mean, you all can vote on it and that's fine. I'm not willing to support it with that last addition.
Let me try again, let me withdraw that motion. I move that NCLA refer this draft RFP to the library commission as a starting point for the study.
Say that.
With the implication being we support their study session going forward and.
Oh, yeah.
So, with the motion that, moves that NCLA refer the draft RFP to the library commission as a starting point for the study session. Member Daley made the motion, member Hill seconded, all others in favor? All in favor.
Already just voted.
Yes,
Okay, thank you. I know it would be nice to say, let's issue the RFP, but we have to bring the entire group along so that it can be reported.
Well, I think, well, that's another thing, I don't think we can issue an RFP.
No, I'm
It
not.
has to be the city or, you know.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
Oh, okay.
I wish we could move faster, I wish we could do more, I could go on with that, but.
You know that we voted on this, and it's just a point of clarification for me. So why does our city attorney need to take a look at the NCLA statement, how the funds can be used?
Los Altos city attorney who
Yeah.
wants to have a look at some of this.
It's our
It's our
building, I mean, she's
building.
gotta agree with it, if she doesn't feel it's a, she has a different opinion, actually, Mr. Karnazak.
Yeah, I'm just happy to answer. I think ultimately, any document that goes out would have to have the city attorney's approval. So the RFP in all its forms of the library commission, and then ultimately when it gets to city council would have that approval from our city attorney, basically authorizing she's comfortable with where these funds are coming from and what they're being allocated for.
Great.
So for this one, she would probably be the ultimate authority that would determine where the RFP falls.
But not necessarily, ruling on this particular RFP, I don't know that would be worth your time, because it's gonna go through changes.
Oh, yeah,
No,
I mean, we'll go
as
through
it stands
changes.
right now.
right,
As it before.
oh, it's gonna go through changes, of course,
She wouldn't see this draft until the library commission
Okay,
has
yeah.
met.
And so she would take a look at the NCLA, JPA agreement and interpret that. Use that as a document. to-
oh, yeah,
Okay,
yeah, it's the whole thing, and the most recent, tax measure and and
okay.
everything. Because, so imagine this, I'm not an attorney, there's a lot of women in the room here. But if we start on a project, and then there's, a challenge to the use of the funds, and we've already ripped out half the library because we thought we were okay, I mean, she's gotta feel that that's a low.
Well, there may be
Right, so,
other funds in there into.
well, that's actually what I was gonna make the point, I don't know if this is in the future agenda, but I do think that for the council, we need to show more than what NCLA is bringing if there are other potential funds. I mean, we can describe it all as potential, but this is a fairly comprehensive RFP. And if it's, a combination of funds, it looks more realistic that we can achieve something than if it's just NCLA.
Yeah, and that is it.
Okay,
And I think Molly's already said,
Friends have.
friends,
friends, okay.
somebody.
Okay,
Okay,
correct, yeah, thank you.
so library commission, does this give you enough to go tell the next step?
Big problem. Back at you.
Sorry, the blinding light.
Yeah.
The.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and we can come back and ask, I think, individual questions, just to clarify, but this is a great start, thanks.
The one thing I wanted to add though is that from Anthony's perspective, there should be a format for our reviews that they go out. And I'm not sure that we follow the most office format, so that's.
I wouldn't worry about that.
Always weird.
Well,
Format.
before it goes out, definitely.
We actually did not, because I did look on the website, there were no active RFPs, so I couldn't find it. I would have if I could.
Okay, shall we move to item 2? Discussion of NCLA outside cost sharing with member entities and approval of annual cost share invoices to the city of Los Altos and the town of Los Altos Hills. And my understanding is that town of Los Altos Hills paid their portion in June, and Los Altos did not pay their portion in June. And now we're ready to send out 2 more invoices, which has brought up the question of how are these actually going to be split? And that's the conversation now. I don't know, if Peter, you said Dave is on the way, for Los Altos Hills.
Well, the last cost sharing we did, a couple months back, we did 50-50.
And then the next one changed.
Well, but there's also an issue, about basic services. What we're supposed to be doing is the 2 meetings a year, this is all extra, so.
Well, personally, given the funds this organization's had, I would be fine for paying for all administrative services, and I know
And
that's.
CLA, you mean?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I mean, that may not be a completely popular view, but we gotta get this going, which we're trying to do, to spend the money. Getting it going is an important, step. And the towns, I mean, they're kind of tough on money.
I agree with you, Lisa. I would just point to the actual text of the JPA, section 12. Quote, the city of Los Altos shall provide staff and basic services from the agency, all costs and expenses of an outside nature such as auditing, consulting, or the like, shall be apportioned equally among the member entities. I would like to see the JPA pay for things that we were considering extra, right? But I don't know that it conforms with the law based on this JPA agreement. So we could, if we were of mind to do so, amend the JPA itself. This doesn't touch on the controlling ordinance for parcel tax, but it is governed by the text of our signed agreement. So if we want to change that, we should, I don't know, maybe do an addendum or something.
We have to go back to council.
I don't know whether,
I would
it's a process.
I don't know, it's complicated, I think, but I don't know that I felt that, I'm not trying to remember. When I read it, I felt that it was clearly within the purview, to pay for administrative costs.
The language of the parcel tax
Yes,
ordinance says that. I did not find it, I don't know, I'm not, I can't quote chapter versus the JPA agreement, but I think it's.
So what document do you think about?
I'm in the JPA as well, I'm looking at the purpose. So first of all, I think rather than us, so the purpose is to create an agency that will plan, support, acquire, maintain, and operate programs and facilities for the extension of public library services for the benefit of having. I mean, so this is clearly that. I don't know, maybe Mr. Carnesecca has something, because I felt that it was,
Do you feel that we could do this without an
Well,
JDA?
well, yeah, I mean, we did it already a few months
Well,
ago,
yeah,
so.
so we weren't explicitly doing it, we were assuming other things were the other way, but, or the cost will be picked up out of towns.
Didn't do it.
I think city staff is comfortable with whatever split is determined, so if that's 50-50, population based, any of that nature, but I think the question whether basic or the extra services is really, to Mayor Meadows' point is, the 2 meetings are absolutely necessary for the JPA, and other meetings, special meetings, other projects, I think city staff would tend to agree that those may fall at the JP or NCLA's cost as opposed to the city.
So how do we determine what those are? That seems to be an issue, because certainly having, clerk manage our business, but then we've also been having more meetings, so we split up her costs, the NFB, and those would be considered normal costs, I assume. But we've been going out to council more than we normally would. So what's the suggestion on how to split those?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should ask, go back to the council, Claire, and say, are we within the confine, I mean, it's certainly the case on the parcel tax. Is it okay for us to pay our own administrative costs? I mean, the basic is Anthony's sitting here, we're paying for him to sit here, we put up the postings on the website. That's, again, city staff time, so we're doing that, we're not billing Anthony. But all the rest of it is work of the authorities.
Yeah, I tend to agree, just because we're trying to pick this thing up and get it moving, and then the amount of time we spend on it ought to go way down again. And it's part of this organization's duty to kind of pick up and do that, and also just.
Here, actually, section 15, an operating fund shall be established or maintained, which shall be used to pay all administrative and incidental expenses incurred by the agency. Revenues for the operating fund should be derived from the levy and collection of special taxes and or service charges, contributions, etc. So,
I read that as the NCLA should be paid
yes,
under that paragraph.
your highlighter ran out too early.
The fact that not every paragraph of this
Yes.
agreement code either.
Yes, yes.
I don't have any comments right now.
Artie, any comments or?
Not really, I can barely speak. This has been interesting to hear. All great comments.
Okay. Okay. Is that Artie? Okay. I think I'll open up for public discussion. Yeah, Suzanne.
There's a lot of discussion here. So this is the Citizen Oversight Committee of the Library Funds. Well, we budget our funds for the library. And the oversight to make sure they're used in the best, most efficient and effective way for the library. This document is written so that it protects that. Any administrative costs, any outside expenses are paid by the 2-member entities. It's not very much money. It's very little money for the cities. They were paying $400,000 a year to provide the extra hours for the library in the early 1980s, until we had the economic crisis. Other cities in our county right now are providing money from their city budgets for their libraries. How much money was in the 1,000?
Well, I I think that's a little unfair because the citizens are being taxed, so.
Yeah,
so it is
this is
coming
the
from the
only.
Yeah, to the point of order, we're not answering questions.
So this,
We're taking-
this document was written so that it protected that. It was written so that all the administrative costs and all the outside expenses are covered. It's explicitly written, so there couldn't be any misunderstanding.
I just read section
Yeah,
15.
section 15 is very.
It's very clear, actually, where it says, city of Los Altos shall provide staff basic services.
That's section 12.
Right, all costs and expenses. Yes, we are.
Of the
paying for
basic
all
services.
But we were.
Wait, I thought we were in.
Yeah, we're not supposed to.
So I did ask the attorney, 6 years ago, Christopher Diaz of S. Krieger was our attorney at that time, about this phrase, that all costs and expenses of outside nature shall be apportioned equally among the member entities. To me, the portion should have been Los Altos Hills, I was a representative from Los Altos Hills, was a lot smaller in terms of population parcels in Los Altos, and why were we paying the same amount? I questioned him. He at that time said a portion equally meant 50-50, and among the member entities, among meant among a subset was member entities, and the 2 member entities, that meant 50-50. And so we have continued to be filling out 50-50. Last October, Cindy and I met with Dave over at City Hall. We were talking about the fact that we weren't getting enough assistance and staffing assistance, especially financial. And so he, at that meeting, said that he had talked to Peter, and Peter had agreed that Los Altos Hills would pay for a portion of the administrative. And then Dave brought up at that meeting that he felt that the outside expenses should also be apportioned by population. And I said, well, I thought that too at a time, and I actually asked about it, and I was told, no, it was 50-50. So because of that conversation, Dave said, no, portion could be by anything, could be by population, could be by parcel. It doesn't have to be by just the 2 member entities. And so based on that conversation that he and Peter had this agreement, is why I told Cindy that with new billing, instead of doing it 50-50, it would be by population. So that's how that happened, instead of her just filling it out 50-50.
Use Christie.
Yeah.
But why are you telling Christie what to do? The authority has to tell Christie what to do.
Yeah, so this was when I was on the authority.
But even so, the authority, all 5 of us, one of us doesn't give
Well,
direction.
and-
as a
and-
whole.
and-
Yeah, I'm not bringing that up again. I
Yes.
think that was a little bit.
So if that isn't the agreement that the city want, it doesn't matter to us. It's to be paid by the member entities. Whether, so this is
The basic
serve the city, but
Okay.
bring other data.
Could we let Gabe speak to it because he's.
Yeah, I
also-
mean, it's just up to him, it's whichever way they wanna do it, and we don't really care much. I do wanna bring up that by, he's there agreeing that the city's salary will be paid out of the library fund over the next 7 years, which is why we have to, that's gonna be about $400,000 out of the library funds.
We're not paying city salary.
I mean, not the city, Christie, Christie. So, yeah, so we've already given away a lot of library funds.
Well, yeah, let's Gabe. He's lurking in the background. Sorry, Gabe, you're very tiny.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes,
So the 2 questions before the authority tonight, one could be quite simple. This board does need to determine the apportionment. Los Altos staff is agnostic. You can apportion it however you want. Population 50-50 split, however you feel it appropriate, and the cities will pay for that. That part should be clear. There's multiple parts that get kind of fuzzy when you move past what is a basic service provision, who would fund the operating fund, who completes the annual audit, things like that. Where we landed on that is historically, the city had taken on a lot of costs that would be outside of what's considered basic services, primarily around financial and fiduciary oversight. So I think that is a discussion that the authority should also have. I think for tonight, the apportionment, so we can get the bills paid, would be appropriate. And if we want to look into how we feel the definition of basic services is versus how they've been performed, we're happy to do that as well, unless the authority feels they can make a decision on that tonight as well. In general, we're citing a lot of sections of the operating agreement, and I would say we're outside in a couple of areas. So we may want to have a larger conversation to make sure we're adhering to it as written and as it's been applied.
I didn't understand your comment, we're outside of it in several areas, meaning outside of what you consider normal operating expenses?
Outside of how the JPA, I mean, one came up tonight, we talked about the operating fund that should be established, and unless there's one that I'm not aware of, I'm not sure that operating fund has been established. There's specific fiduciary accountability that the authority has to undertake every year. But the city has been taking that on historically. So I think we need to decide the apportionment tonight. If the authority wants to go further tonight, that's okay too. But I was saying we also may want to just review the agreement in its entirety so everyone has a similar understanding.
And even if we assign the apportionment, it's not going to affect how the bill, we'll bill for anything, because we're still questioning what we're actually covering. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I think the apportionment, if that's decided, that the city will pay its portion of the bill, the town will pay its portion of the bill. We're not intending to try and stop the NCLA from meeting or moving forward. But we do need to get clarity on it primarily before the audit starts or the audit's completed, and that audit season is coming up.
I guess, but the bill that we've submitted would include services that the city wouldn't accept as normal.
Well, I think that's a true statement, but I'm also saying we would pay them because we don't have a definition. So what we think is normal may end up being what the authority thinks, or it might go the other way, right? So, but I think for the bills that are submitted, as long as we understand the apportionment, we're happy to process them, as long as NCLA has the larger conversation at some point. I do think primarily going into audit, the authority should be really clear on what the responsibilities of the NCLA are.
In terms of payments?
In terms of operation and audit and what is a basic service.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, no.
Alan Epstein, I live in Los Altos Hills. I think the taxpayers, when they agreed to tax themselves for $76, intended all that money to go to enhance services to the library. And I believe that two towns agreed that they would cover all the other costs associated with it. You're the fiduciary representatives for the taxpayers who agreed to put up that money. I don't think there's a fiduciary reason for why you would change and pay someone else's bill. Now, I understand that you're council members in the city, and I understand you're a council member in the town. When you walk into this room, your hat goes off. Your fiduciary responsibility for the NCLA goes on. If you're going to pay someone else's bill, bring my tax bill, then you can pay my tax bill, or you can pay your own tax bill. I don't see any basis for how you, as fiduciaries to this organization, can decide to tear up the JPA, tear up the intent of the voters when they pass this thing and decided, well, we think the city needs money, or we think the town needs more money. We're all taxpayers who pay the city, we're all taxpayers who pay the town. And we think you get enough money for those functions, for performing those things, and we voted to allow this to take place so that we would get more services from that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, and we're back here. Oh, I'm sorry, here.
I hate to bring this up, but from the city side, I know this issue, we tried to legislate it at some point. So there were things that were put up for both the city council and at Los Altos Hills. I know the town of Los Altos Hills voted for it. I don't know that it went through.
So any amendment to the JPA has to be done by the two city managers, and then it goes to the city councils for approval. It's not, that's something that.
My comment is really just to search the record and make sure there's nothing hanging out.
I'd like to make a motion.
Wait, I'm.
I didn't, unless there's any more discussion, then.
Well, we can discuss the motion on the, on the
Okay.
motion on the floor, right?
Okay.
Pursuant to section 15 of the JPA, I move that the NCLA establish an operating fund and pay all of these expenses from that operating fund.
I don't have financial knowledge to know, or the, legal knowledge to know that that's a thing you can do.
Well, then,
You have to have a
maybe we should ask the
second.
attorney,
Point of
but-
order, you have to have a second on the motion before you do discussion.
I'll second it so we can discuss. So,
Can you repeat the motion, please?
Yes, for section 15 of the JPA agreement, we move that NCLA establish an operating fund and pay all administrative expenses out of that.
so, what I would propose, and again, I do feel, and we've had the discussion already, NCLA is way beyond its remit in terms of, you know, the 2 meetings a year, we're meeting much more frequently than that, and going beyond, what the, strict definition is. The JPA agreement does allow for an operating fund to pay for all this kind of things, so let's not revise the JPA, have it right in front of you. But what I would suggest before making that decision, even though I seconded the motion, I would suggest that we apportion things 50-50. The city is already bearing the staff and the website, et cetera, costs. That all these invoices be 50-50, and we get direction regarding, and maybe that's part of the review of the agreement on whether it is justified, says so, but whether we can bill the administrative costs to NCLA. So that is, I seconded it so we can have a discussion, but I'd rather apportion it 50-50 from now. Again, we're spending a lot more time in this authority than we're supposed to, and then take it up and have a discussion about what the JPA does allow and what we want it to allow, and do we need any revisions because basic service versus other, et cetera. So that is what I would propose.
I like the idea of paying the bills now on a 50-50 basis and, you know, clearing the table of the bills that we've accrued to this point. And then getting an opinion from the attorney as to whether or not this operating fund is appropriate under the wording of the JPA agreement, but the parcel tax ordinance. And I believe strongly that it is, because I'm very familiar with the wording of
And actually, I believe when we were bringing MRG on, we looked at that and determined that those administrative costs would be borne by the authority. So that we already did. But I'm
It's
saying a
fair,
broader
too.
look.
It's fair, right? Because Hills residents contribute an amount of tax as a portion, governed by the number of parcels, as do Los Altos residents. And so in the end, if it's paid out of NCLA, that's actually the fairest way to apportion the obligation.
So one of the primary reasons that we have an outside service like they is because the city of Los Altos did not have the staff any longer to support it. So it was historic that we had staff, we had the city manager here, and we had a liaison, and we even had the finance person come to the meetings And even when they moved from 2 meetings to 4 meetings a year because NCLA became more complex in what it could do, the city supported that until staffing became an issue. So it was only at that point that outside services needed to be hired.
But that does acknowledge that it was fully resourced when it was 2 meetings, and then the slippage occurred, and then eventually that just became too much, so.
Part of it was, even at 2 meetings, we were starting to see a step away of city staff.
Sally, would you consider, or somebody else on?
I have one comment, so Madam Secretary. I mean, the operation of the JPA and the governance of it is incredibly important, and it doesn't function unless it's paid for. So saying that the JPA itself can't pay for its own functioning, to me, just doesn't make sense. And it sounds like it's borne out in there as well. When it was simply paying for staff, because that's what we're replacing, it was a pretty simple function going through, and now we're trying to figure out what to do with all this money, which is, we have to remember, a good problem to have, that it's a lot more complicated.
Well, and our bills are bigger, right? I mean.
Because of that complication, as Cindy says, it's just become more of a job, which is okay, but it requires more support from outside agencies than it did before.
So what I was going to ask is if one of my colleagues would consider making a friendly amendment that would simply add as well that we are going to, check with the NCLA attorney to make sure that the operating fund is.
I can't support the motion, but I can support the intent. So I would prefer that we get the opinion first and then review the motion. See if we need to keep it as it is or change it.
So I would suggest withdraw the motion. I would support withdrawing it and make a motion that verbalizes what I said, which is to pay the bill. Well, again, MRG bill, we've
Just
agreed.
make that as a substitute motion and then we
Yeah,
have.
okay, substitute motion, that's right, thank you. All right. Substitute motion, that pursuant to NCLA's previous decision, MRG is paid out of NCLA funds, and that other funds will be split 50-50 by the 2 member entities. And we will then take a future agenda item to, and maybe we'll voice this during future agenda items, but I'll go ahead and say it now, to review the agreement to help determine what's basic services versus beyond basic, and that we will have an opinion on whether NCLA can pay all of its expenses per an operating fund as described in the JPA agreement or not. So that would be my substitute motion.
But could you read it?
She's still writing.
So in essence, hopefully, not word for word yet, MRG, the substitute motion is made that MRG is paid of NCLA funds entirely as determined in the previous meeting. All other outside expenses will be shared 50-50 between the 2 member entities. And a future agenda item will be made to review the agreement, establish which items are basic administrative expenses. I lost the last part.
Versus beyond the scope of basic, and whether section 15 operating fund covers some or all of those expenses. So we can really look at the whole thing carefully, not.
I do have a comment here.
And apply reissuing these invoices to the town, which I think is fine. Right now, they include the MRG.
Yes,
So we would take the
Yeah, they
MRG
do
out.
not, the current
Oh, they
invoices
do
that
not?
were sent do not include.
Okay, and so we would issue these invoices to the town and then go forward, oh, but we're not doing 50-50, so we have to reissue it.
Yeah.
At least 50-50. Okay.
And I'd like a friendly amendment that we pick a date when we're going to have this reviewed by. Because right now it's open-ended.
I would put it on the next.
Well,
agenda item.
we'll talk, yeah,
Yeah, okay.
or when we can get, I think we probably should have the city managers for that discussion and or the city attorneys as well,
Artie,
whatever, so as soon as possible.
Artie has a comment.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so I'm sorry about that. This is 2 minutes. What we were discussing 2 or 3 minutes ago on the basic fee and then the division of the fees between Los Altos Hills and Los Altos. Can we determine that, or are we asking for the two city councils agreement?
I think we can determine it.
Gabe said we could determine, our city manager said we can determine the apportionment. And in fact, per Pete's point, because the funds go in on a population basis, in essence, that's apportioned per population
If,
as well.
if like pays for it. because-
Right, which is gonna be right now until we have the attorneys look at it, so yes.
Okay,
Did that answer your question, Artie?
okay, that does. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Did
Okay,
my substitute motion have a second?
I don't, no, you don't have a second on your substitute.
well, because Cindy asked for a friendly amendment.
No, but she is.
Okay, so you're, okay.
But did you want to amend the motion instead of saying a future agenda item to say December?
Well, we don't make, that doesn't need to be in the motion, we'll just put it on the agenda.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion that MRG is paid out of NCLA funds entirely, that all other administrative expenses be shared 50-50 between the two member entities, and that there will be a future agenda item to review the agreement as to which items are basic administrative expenses and which are beyond the scope of basic administrative expenses, and to discuss whether section 15 operating funds can cover all other expenses. All in favor?
Artie,
And Artie, aye, so that is unanimous, and
and when we get to future agenda items, we'll remember that discussion. Okay, next up is approval of minutes. Are there any comments?
I move we approve the minutes.
all in favor?
Artie,
Artie, do you approve the minutes?
approval of minutes? She's okay.
You're unmuted if you want to talk.
Yes, 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 yes.
Thumbs up did it though.
My voice is so awful that I'm anyway muted, so.
You don't wanna sing for us tonight? Okay, and then final item on the agenda is approval of current invoices for payment, which I believe are right there in the packet.
I had one question, because, but maybe it was earlier, I'm confused when you have invoices in two different places. Like, there's one up near the front, maybe an informational, and then there's a bunch down towards the end.
So the invoices that appear in the, they have the same letter, page number as the minutes, are invoices that were presented at the previous meeting, and they're part of the minutes. And then the invoices that have G and H,
Pages 48 to 50.
yeah, correct.
So,
We don't need to have invoices as part of minutes.
Okay.
They're part of the board, packet, so people will be able to look them up. Best to just have action minutes and keep it as simple as possible.
actually, that's a good point, so not just that the invoices don't need to be there, but I don't think the conversations need to be captured to the degree you are, because I think it's much better to refer back, you know, if we had specific question to refer back anyway. So I would agree, action minutes would be, but again, just, does everyone agree? Yeah.
Makes it slightly easier for Christie too.
Yeah.
Okay, a motion on the minutes.
We did them in.
I'm sorry,
The invoices.
I moved that we paid the invoices.
Lisa,
I'm sorry.
is there gonna be?
I guess there is.
There's a question. On the invoice, Tracy, you have two from NVS that both say professional services from July 1, 2022 to June 30, 2023. The new one should say July 1, 2023 through June 30, 2024. That should be corrected, prior to approval, and then there is a line item that they have property data expense, $612 that they're charging us, which is unusual, from what we usually see. So I think that it would be good for the board to ask Ricky to call NVS to inquire what that charge is for.
I think the professional services were provided July 1st to June 30th, 2023.
We board paid for the professional services from July 1, 2022 to June 30, 2023. And that actually was in the minutes, but what is in the minutes? For $7,177.70. So the new invoice should speak for the current fiscal year. When you're paying, including now, you need to state what you're supposed. And it also is going to have to be very unusual chart.
It's an invoice for a month, right?
For a year,
Or
it's for a year.
for the year.
We have invoice every.
I see, okay. Following the point is we have two separate invoices. One is dated September 1st, the other one is September 21st. And they both need to be paid.
Correct. I understand Suzanne's point that the page labeled H1, the invoice for the $8,109.57 should reflect the current fiscal year for current services that are currently being provided.
Rather than through June 2023.
Correct, because that would have already been paid. I do understand that. And I understand the request to clarify the property data expense. So I can certainly do that if it is the board's wish. And then the two different ones are simply because the $2,500 expense is for the servicing of the senior exemption that was previously negotiated amount.
Yes, can you please clarify that?
Yeah, so if the one on H1 is supposed to be, I mean, it's unusual to pay all this forward, isn't it? I mean,
No, it happens every year, we do it every year.
we pay in advance, including postage. How can we know what postage is?
They're billing you, under the expenses, they're billing you from the previous budget. If you look at previous years, you say that this is the routine,
My understanding is that the services that they provide begin in July because that's when they register for the property tax processing. And so the expense items that you see here were likely incurred in July and August, and now they're invoicing them.
But that, okay. So then that would be the current calendar year. And that's what you're saying, the date is the professional services is actually July 1st, 2023.
Yeah.
So we pay forward for the professional services.
We have a motion, you want to amend the motion?
What? We still need to pay the invoices, so, you know, the motion to pay the invoices is fine, and we'll give you guidance separately to double check the date for the professional services line item on the invoice each one. And required a property data expense, but those two things can be guidance. So the most important of those.
We need a vote, Artie has.
I don't think we have any reports by commissions, which are committees, unless there's any comments or-
I have one comment. I would like us to ask Chrissy to update our norms. He's the only person left on this list. So I think we need to get the other four members in here. It's dated August 31st, 2016, and is on our NCLA list. So I can work with you, Chris, on that. And I don't know if at some point in the far future, we would want to look at this and see if it is in alignment with Los Altos and Los Altos norms and procedures. Thank you for looking that up. Didn't want to be standing alone. And then future agenda items.
Yeah,
Oh,
so,
you have something?
well, no, I already gave the update about the study session.
Which seemed to make sense in the beginning.
To do with it. So again, I think we already verbalized the future agenda items regarding reviewing the agreement, so, so that you have. And the other one then is that we need to look at all, fiduciary options for tax overage.
And
Including returning it to the taxpayers. And any other options that are.
Have a very
appropriate to
good
consider.
document from which to start.
where is that?
It's in our minutes, if I can go back. It's
That would be
not that
excellent.
old, it's maybe less than a year old, Suzanne. I said
Yeah,
after the last meeting. you
okay,
did.
I got it if you send it to me, along with another 1,000 emails a day that I get.
Yeah.
There might be other, and so it'd be good,
What's the title of the document?
yeah, it'd be good to get that, and there
Probably
might
the
be others.
Yes, because I have no
Or
idea.
anyway.
Or other than-
So what I'll do is I'll send it to Christie, so she
Oh,
can
yeah, I
distribute
got it, yeah.
it.
Perfect.
You get it?
Yeah, I have that.
So other features and agenda items. Those are the two that I remember. I guess another one will be a review of the study session.
And the library commission.
Yeah, yeah, share away. Report from the library commission and the study session. Any other information? That's all I can think of. I know we said the date, it was like 12 early in.
December 4th is the next one.
Okay.
Sorry, December 4th.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
You want to give the librarian of the county, opportunity then? About report? Sure.
Okay.
You want to for me? Sure. I guess the most exciting thing is that study pods are now, observable and they say that they're open. Yeah. There's a single seater, 4-seater each.
They look fabulous.
Yes, they're some things to look at. Those, that's our biggest news, I guess.
Your volunteer event.
Oh, yes,
that's
and
lovely.
yes, thank you, for,
Sorry, I wasn't there.
oh, that's okay.
Somebody ran a meeting until 2.
Well, that's what you managed to get there.
Which is better than this.
And I'll give you for those who did attend the photo.
really nice gift, so I'll bring them. For board members. And we're planning our science and technology week, we're probably sponsoring that in November, so that's event with different, for, it's a whole week of events for all years, related.
Well, actually, the library DPA is meeting in October, which is the last meeting of this year, and are very pleased that, you know, our property tax is still strong and their act is still in place, so our budgets are good and looking forward to continuing our work around our strategic plan. So I will give a call out to Rose. I think in being one of our smaller and oldest buildings, her team really does make over and above efforts to ensure that your community benefits in some ways, from the different ways of using furniture solutions of the pods, thanks to benefiting from all of the organizations, as well as really looking at, you know, where programs are and making sure that housing plus is available. So we'll continue to be sure. With others.
I was a great note in on the review. With that, I adjourn.
Oh, wait.